What's up? This is Dominique Beaumonte, and you are listening to Season with Salt, the podcast.
What are you wearing under that? I was like, you look like you're ready for outside.
I know, right? What's up, everybody? My name is Dominique. What's your name?
Christian.
Dominique and Christian. We're just sitting here, and we are just chatting. Where are we at right now?
We are at Just Cultured Barber Studio, which is in Midtown Sacramento, over on 16th and K.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's where we're at.
Do you sometimes go by Chris?
I do. I didn't start going by Chris until my 20s.
Okay. Because I asked that because people have been trying to call me Dom lately. And I'm wondering if I should just break that wall down.
Are you into it, though?
I want to be relatable. What generally offends me is how it's introduced.
Okay.
Like the last time somebody said, hey, Dominique is so formal. What is there something I can do to shorten it? Like, and it was somebody from a dominant culture, and I just felt like you don't have that.
Like, no, you can't.
No, right. If you would like for me to offer you some variations of my name that are comfortable for me, I would be happy to. So I ended up conceding in the moment and just saying, you know what? Usually people call me Damo, but I realized in the moment, I just was like, this is not the setting for that either. So I'm just going to go with like.
Did Damo feel too personal for that particular person?
It felt
I don't know if I even want that person, because that feels like.
It felt too personal.
Okay.
It felt too personal. And that came to mind. Like I had like a traumatic response to, because when I was going to introduce you as Chris, and then I thought, how would you like to be introduced?
Well, for me, I mean, I love my name, Christian. I think that like it's always felt fitting for me, right? Like, I don't think my dad knew when he gave me the name that he was giving me such an ambiguous name that then would translate into who I am today, right? Right. I don't thank him enough. I'm sure I don't know if he would appreciate the thanks at this point, but and like I said, I haven't. No one started calling me Chris until I was like well into my 20s. Like I never had a nickname growing up.
Okay.
I was always Christian. All my siblings had nicknames.
Okay.
And I always had feelings about that, right? Okay. Where I was like, well, why doesn't anybody want to give me a nickname, right?
Right.
And no one's nickname actually coincided with their name. So Chris is great, right?
Yeah.
But I don't mind Christian.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like in this season of life, in my 40s, like I need to be okay with it and I need to be not okay with it. Like I need to decide what areas I will make concessions and what areas I will not. But I thought like I do want to be called like Pastor B or Pastor D. So this is inappropriate. I knew it.
I am immature. So
I knew it. I had a job.
You did it to yourself.
No, I'm just gonna go there. I had a job, and there was a person there that regularly referred to me as Big D, and I felt like I needed to report. And you know, you do like the sexual harassment training. I would always feel in my spirit like I need to say something. Right. Because to me, it was just so like it was like Big Dom or something like that. It just all felt just, let's lay off all of the descriptives. Let's lay off the shortening of names. It's been a really hard life with the initial D.
I can see that, right? I think from my perspective, as a person who never had a nickname, you have like variants, right? Like you got options. You know what I mean? Like I think Chris is about as far as I go, right? Like,
C doesn't quite work.
C doesn't quite work.
No.
Big C,
Big C, little C,
I'm
middle
a
C.
mid-size C, so I don't think anybody's
Okay.
calling me Big C,
Okay.
and I'm too like mid-size to be small C,
Okay.
little C. I don't
Yeah.
think that's happening. So,
And it starts getting offensive after a while
yeah,
too.
like the more people try to get creative with it, I think it gets more offensive, right?
Mhm.
And then it's just like, just call me by my name.
So I'm one of three. You have siblings too.
Mhm.
I'm one of three sons, and we're all with the same initials, DB.
Okay.
And so I generally refer to my middle brother as Middle Bo, and my baby brother as Baby Bo.
That's
But
cute.
nobody refers to me as like Big Bo or Older Bo or anything like that.
And you can't return a favor?
No, I just think it's fine.
Okay.
I think it's
You were
clear
okay
I'm
with
the
that?
older one. Like I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Maybe a big bro every now and again is going to be okay for me, but I'm fine with what I'm being called.
Damo.
Damo is cool for me. I'm gonna relive that. So, full disclosure, I didn't give myself that name when I was in high school. I went to a school called Thomas Jefferson High School, and their mascot, believe it or not, wink, wink, hint, hint, were the Democrats, and the mascot was we call ourselves Demos.
Okay.
So I was one of the persons a part of the spirit community. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay.
Maybe I was a cheerleader. Maybe I was on a team. I don't know. You can figure that out for yourself. I'm not ashamed. It's just not.
But you were creating.
I was bringing the spirit.
Bringing the spirit.
And so people call me Demo Damo.
Okay.
So, and there was a little jingle that went along with it, and I did not like it because I would be in the mall or somewhere, and people would
just like bust out with it.
Demo Damo. So once I got to college, I wanted to be something different.
Okay.
So I try to get away from that. But anyway, you live, you learn, and there's some things you don't shake because when my younger siblings like came to school behind me, people would be like, "Oh, you're Demo Damo's brother." So
you weren't living it down.
That was important for them though, So I didn't worry about it. So let me ask you a question. You're the subjects being interviewed, not me.
Turn it around.
It's okay. It's okay. You tell me about your entrepreneurial journey. Like, did you just wake up and say, because I think there's a difference between being a person who, and I need to know all the language. Are you a barber? How do you identify when it comes to your craft?
I'm a business owner who's a barber.
You're a business owner who's a barber. Okay. What are the other words for barber?
I mean, for what I do specifically, I don't think
there needs to be another word.
And I think there are very few words, right? And there's very few language or things that pertain to people in the hair industry, right? Like, because it's so gendered, right? Like, so you're either a stylist or you're a barber, right? The in between, there isn't really one, right? So, yeah, coming up with some new words would be awesome, but I don't particularly know how they exist. So what I used to struggle with before coming out as trans was the female barber sort of label, right? Which was for me troublesome because nobody's walking around saying male barber. Right. That's true. They're just barbers, right? Like you're just a barber, right? Like the industry in itself it didn't matter like about your gender, right? Like you were doing the same exact haircuts as your counterparts, right? So why was there a difference between a female barber and a male barber, right? So I think that was always the piece for me that I tried to move away from, like being placed in this box, right? I certainly put myself in that box because at the time when I first started cutting hair, that's what we had, right? Like that was the language that existed. And so you kind of like, as a queer person, I was like, I hate boxes, but here I was kind of playing into it because I needed to, right? In order to exist in the world.
I was going to ask you if you ever felt pressured to gender yourself because of your vocation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said early on, that was it, right? Like everything was like, there were even like barber battles, like female barber battles, right? And there was just never like, oh, women in the industry who cut hair can just be barbers, right? And be a part of the barber industry in the same way that cis men were, right? There was always this uh, alternative connotation that because you're a woman and a barber, that you were in a like lane or a world of your own.
Right. Almost
right?
like whose hair are you cutting?
Right.
Like, you understand.
Like
How
not,
does this work?
it's not like
Are you cutting kitchens?
right? Like just like unicorns. Like we only specialize in cutting unicorns' hair, right? So like, yeah, I always thought that was interesting, and it was one of the things that like really sort of like used to grind my gears. Where I was like, this is weird, right? Like I had like dudes come to me and be like, man, I ain't never been to a female barber, and I'm like, so you've just never been to a barber, right? Like who's a woman, right? Like and like why, and what does that mean, right? And there was always this stigma that was carried that like women barbers were not good enough or not as good as men, right? Which very quickly changed once cis dudes realized that they were.
So, and I don't know if this is, I don't know if you feel this way about yourself, but I think we all wear like layers, and we get to choose like, are we a summation of layers? Or are we just who we are? And I say that because you introduce yourself as a entrepreneur who is a barber. But in the time that we've known each other, what I see is a congruence in who you are as an entrepreneur and who you are as a person. And this space for which you're the owner of, I think you've made it very clear that it is a reflection and a representation of either all the layers that represent you or who you are, so that people can come in this space and find themselves. Is that tell me about that as an entrepreneur? When you envision this space, like were you thinking of it were you wrestling with that, being the gender issues surrounding entrepreneurial stuff and being a barber? Like what were you thinking about?
Well, I mean, I was thinking about the experience, right? Like it was always about the experience to me. It was when I first started cutting hair, I had a really great mentor. And one of the key takeaways that he taught me that I always stuck with me was it's about the experience first, right? Like when somebody steps through a door, it's like walking into somebody's house, right? You immediately feel the vibe, right? Like you know exactly what you're gonna get when you walk through those doors, right? And so for me, I always like I held on to that, right? And even moving into my own when I became my own business owner, it was always experience first, and then like what's gonna come after. All of those things can evolve, be taught, learned as they come. But like the one thing I want people to take away from it is like, oh, can I feel like myself in this space, right? Before we even get to the surface, right? Like walk through the door is like, all right, okay, do I feel a sense of ease, a sense of peace, right? Like, so when developing this space, I just kind of took bits and pieces from all of the different like spaces that I've worked in. I've kind of learned and like took a step back and like really observed how different barbershops operated, right? And saw what worked and saw what didn't, right? And I just built on that.
Yeah, I can identify with that. As far as without saying too much, like when I think about places that I go that are like barbershops or where I want to go eat at, like feeling like I'm at home is important to me because I grew up as a foster kid, and like feeling safe was important. So I appreciate that from the perspective of a business owner, like wanting to create a safe space for people. And I'll say, because I think it's important, because what you have created makes even a pro-Black Pentecostal preacher feel safe. Okay, right? I feel safe. Like nobody has forced me to be here. I'm not intimidated by anybody. I feel good. You know what I mean? I think that that's important. When you are thinking about, because as an entrepreneur, you're inviting people not only into your space as a customer, but as a consumer, but also as an employer. I know this is dangerous talk, right? But when you think about the kinds of people that you want to carry what this is, the legacy, the feel, what is important to you when you're talking to someone who says, you know what, I want to bring my craft to this space?
I think the biggest thing is alignment, right? Like making sure that what is being offered here aligns with them as much as it aligns with me, right? I'm trying to create sustainability in this industry, and something that is few and far in between. Barbers are nomads, right? And stylists, for that matter, because they jump and shift around because there's never really anything like holding them to or tying them to a space, right? Whether it's the ethos of a business or the environment or client base, right? Like it's always there's always going to be something or something that's like the next best thing, right? And so for me, it's all about alignment. Like if what I'm offering aligns with you, right, and if what you have to offer aligns with this space, then I think it'll kind of speak for itself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think this is very powerful because far too often people like us have gone to work, right? And we have not only wrestled with how to be who we are gifted to be, but also how to survive, right? And how to deal with bureaucracy and racism and sexism and all the stuff, right? And,
all the isms.
And everybody to a different extent, right? Because even as a man, like I recognize my privilege in spaces where I'm even the minority. But I wondered, just how that has been cultivated for you. But you've said enough about that, and I don't want to get you like riled up about because people are like, oh, I want to work there. I think it's cool to work. For me, and I want to venture into style because an aesthetic is important to me. Like I know I've gone to interviews and been like, I don't want to work there because there's not enough light, there's not enough. You are gifted with the ability to create and sustain an aesthetic, right? Where did that come from? Like, how did you know that like you were gifted in that area?
I would probably give tribute to a few people, right? Okay. My grandma, both my mom and my dad are.
Did she have plastic on her chairs and couches?
Of course she did.
Okay. 100%.
All right. Couch that we were not allowed to touch. Okay. I didn't even know what it felt like in the summertime because we weren't allowed to sit on it. Like was it cold in the winter? Probably. I don't know. We weren't allowed to sit on it. Okay. She was a person. She rented 2 apartments in East Oakland. One she lived in, the other one was strictly for the closet space. She was somebody that, I definitely, looked up to growing up. She was, the pinnacle of the family. My green thumb came from her. She, everything we ate, she grew. Imagine living in an apartment building in the middle of deep East Oakland and like having a full blown like garden on the side of it, right? But extremely stylish woman. And, both my mother and father are also pretty stylish people too. That I, take a lot of their things. I have my dad's mannerisms and all of the things, so I take all the good parts from him for sure. But I've always been taught that to respect and appreciate your space, right? Like that was
That's
like the key
foundation.
component. Yeah, that's like the foundation, right? And make anywhere you go home, right? Doesn't matter if it's for a short time or a long time, right? Make it feel like yours, right? Because we're taught so often that we're not allowed to have things, right? Like it doesn't belong to us, right? So treat it as a temporary fixture, right? Every apartment I lived in, I'm like, nope, I'm painting these walls. Even if I got to paint them back, like it's happening. I'm making this place feel like my home, you know? Yeah, when this year lease is up, we might move, we might not, I don't know. But in the meantime, you know, and so that's sort of like how things grew from. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, like looking back at some of my photos, like some of my older apartments. And, you know, when I didn't have, you know, as much money, I used to like grab furniture off the street and refurbish it, right? And it would be a vibe. Like, it, you know, I had a whole bunch of like vintage things, suitcases, bags, and I make like fixtures out of them. Always had plans.
Yeah.
And then, you know, seeing the evolution, right, of like kind of where I started versus where I am now. And that's just like, you know, I discovered that I have a love for it, right? Like when people walk in feeling like, ooh, I feel good. This is a nice space. Like this, no, and nice is like very subjective, right? Nice doesn't mean you have the nicest things. It just means that it feels good, you know? And so that was always something that like drove me to continue to create space in that way. And also, again, safety is always at the top of it, right? Like, even if my homies are coming over to my house, like having them feel safe in my space, right? Like, is of the utmost importance.
Yeah.
You know?
So what grounds your creativity? Like what inspires you? Like between the door and the shop, like what makes you, because I've watched you sort of build this space and transform this space, and it seems like it's ever evolving.
Always, yeah.
What grounds your creativity?
Ooh, that's a good question. Grounds? I don't know. What sparks my creativity is the space. So how this space came to be the way it looks today, I walked in the doors and my brain just started churning, right? There was not a plan, right? There was nothing that like was developed beforehand, before walking into this space. Thankfully, this particular space had a really dope Black art collective, right? Doing a pop-up before I moved here. The Black Art Foundry, shout out. And when I walked in, there was an installation up, and that sparked the knowing that this was going to be the space for me, right? Like seeing the potential through the eyes and the lens of the artists that existed in this space before, and also feeling that like energy from them, right? And wanting to translate something similar.
Yeah, and I think you've achieved that, or you're in the process of achieving that in an ever-evolving space, which I think is great. So you have, and I don't want to dishonor it by calling it a clothing line. I think a brand is probably a better.
I don't call it a brand.
A brand. Yeah. You have a brand that surpasses just items of clothing, right? Like you've created a culture called Just Culture. What do you want people to know about that brand when it comes to, you know, their own style, and maybe why they would take advantage of that brand? Maybe that I don't like to take advantage. Why they would be a part of it.
Be a part of it. So I created the clothing aspect of things because, you know, in the same way haircuts are kind of a walking business card, right? So is fashion, right? And that's a part of my background. I come from like corporate retail and did image consulting and wardrobe styling for a long time. But I wanted something that was just kind of speak for itself, right? the brand from a merchandise clothing perspective was never something that I wanted to be this ever expanding thing, right? I wanted to create simple pieces that people could just see, right? Walking down the street, somebody's like, ooh, right? I wanted to kind of spark either creativity, a conversation, some form of acknowledgement for like, from just like a human perspective, right? I always told people, it's like, if you're wearing, an item and somebody is like, ooh, like, where did you get that shirt? I want them to have a conversation about what it meant to them to get that item, right? As opposed to just telling them where to get the piece, right? Really try to like engage with why that person's even interested in what it says, right? So having a cultured member of society on the back of your shirt, that means something to someone, right? That means something to you. The reason why you chose to buy it, right? And so I always prompt the question like, what does culture mean to you, right? And like, because I get asked that all the time, like, oh, what does your shirt mean, right? I'm like, no, actually, what does it mean to you? Like, because it's making you ask the question, right? So it's always fun to see what people's like responses are and answers are.
Yeah.
Because culture is so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think anything that you can, especially in this climate, whatever we can do to engage people in conversation about culture and identity and presence and all those things, I think is important. So just to keep this under a certain time, I want you, so there are a lot of people out there who I run into dreamers all the time. And they say, I want to be the next Michael Jordan of basketball. I'm going to have a makeup line. I'm going to be, they're dreaming out loud. And somebody says, oh, that you're not going to be able to do all that. Pick one. Right. Speak to that reality for people and give your best advice to someone who has a lot going on and needs to harness all those talents into something, all those gifts into something productive, and needs to have permission to continue dreaming.
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, like, give yourself the permission to continue dreaming, right? Like, don't let anyone tell you that you can't continue dreaming, right? And don't let anyone compartmentalize your dreams for you, right? And like, if somebody would have told me a year ago that I would move to a new city, open a business, have a baby, all in the span of 6 months, I'd be like, you lying, you know what I mean? However, the way that my brain works and the way that I think about my dreams, right, and I give space to my dreams and I allow for them to live, right, and I'm very much so a, like, affirmations kind of person. Like, you see it, you think it, you live it, you breathe it, right? And the rest will happen, right? Like everything else will kind of like, now my wife doesn't love that so much. She's a little more like, nah, you gotta, like, I need to see it on paper though. And I'm like, nah, baby, I can't show you that because it just lives in here, right? It works. I am finding my balance, right? I'm creating some plans for sure. But you don't need an excuse to live your dreams, right? The world tries to minimize you as is, right? And so if the dream is big, then allow it to be big. If the dream is small and you want it to be bigger, allow it to be bigger. If the dream is small, allow it to be small, right? Like, but still, like, move forward, right? I mean, that's, and believe, right? Believe that it can happen, right? Don't doubt yourself, because you'll get there either way,
I read a good book that one of my favorite books to recommend other people, called The Outlier by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, about just about anyone who's succeeded at something, they're grinding, and they, like, whether people were criticizing them, whether people believed them, they kept going, they kept doing it. And ultimately, when they reached that point of success, it was really about the time that they invested in what they believed in. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think that this is a manifestation of what can happen when you bring your whole self to something. And y'all need to come down here and get your hair cut or get a wash. What else can you do?
I mean, I can do a lot of things.
What do you need?
I think I can do a couple of things. I mean, the biggest thing too is that this also is an event space. So I really
beautiful event space. I'm not Bible study here, huh? We'll work on that.
We're in talk. Yeah, I mean, the event component is just as big as the hair component, right?
Yeah.
When I first started this, I said, I want the space to be a vessel, right? And the hair part is just a vessel to bring the different types of communities together. And I want people to be sparked by inspiration when they walk through these doors, to see something and imagine something that can be hosted here, right?
Yeah. And there have been some things.
Yeah, there have been some
that have
things.
been hosted here,
and there will be some things.
There will be some more things.
Our friend is actually doing she's coming up from Oakland and is collaborating with a beautiful human from out here who's a therapist, and they're doing an adult art party on Saturday. Or no, sorry, Sunday.
Okay.
And there's always an art component to the event and a mindfulness component.
Yeah, and there's beautiful art here. Lots of greenery and things. Okay, well, you know what? We got to do this again. We got to keep the ball rolling and appreciate. I love when people are just like, let's just start talking. Yeah. I don't know what we were supposed to talk about.
I have no idea.
But well, this is what we talked about. I hope you enjoyed listening, and tell us about where they can connect with you on social.
Just Cultured is social media. JustCultured.com is our website. We have an app that is also Just Cultured. Everything is Just Cultured. If you type in that, all of the things will pop up that you need to find in order to locate us, and also find out about who we are.
And I'll add some of that stuff to the show notes so you won't have any excuse. So, all right, you know where to find me. I'm not even gonna say what my socials are because I said them wrong. But
right in the comments. We're gonna type it out.
All right, y'all. Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.